Welcome back to the Full Subjects podcast. We're a little bit late on this one. We're a week late. My goodness. Breaking down our October stats package. I know Cole's shaking his head at me. If you guys listening podcast only, you can't see that because that's not a visual medium. But anyway, breaking down the October stats, going to kind of forecast a little bit, talk about what we're seeing so far in November, what we anticipate seeing until the end of the year. We realistically have about a month or so left of like real estate-y stuff because typically the last 2 weeks of December are pretty quiet. One of our second last stats package episode of the year. So thank you for joining us for that. As always, guys, this podcast is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute any legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. Nailed that without my script. Don't worry about it. Cole, let's take it away with Cole's notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, guys. I will take responsibility for us being a little behind on this one. I decided to take some time off last week, so it's definitely my fault. I will definitely take the blame on that one. But
Unbelievable.
I know, right? How dare I?
It was causing a lot of rifts in the Full Subjects podcast group chat. No, it wasn't.
Exactly.
Please take time off, buddy. Anyway, take it away. Enough sarcasm.
Yeah, no worries. So as always, guys, I like to give kind of a quick market/economic update. So last update, we talked about the rate cut that we saw. I'm going to kind of give an update on what I expect to whether or not we're going to get another rate cut. So we received the unemployment data recently, and it was actually quite a bit better than expected. So unemployment decreased from just over 7% to now under 7%, which, like I said, was unexpected. And what that means is we're unlikely to see a rate cut now in December. The economy is showing some resilience. We're obviously gaining employment because unemployment's going down. So I wouldn't expect a rate cut at this time. Now, we will receive some data for Austin, I'm drawing a blank here. Inflation, which will kind of maybe change the odds here a little bit, but more than likely we're done for rate cuts for 2025, and then early into 2026 we'll kind of see what happens. So there is many economists that are expecting us to still see a rate cut in 2026. More or less, it's probably going to be another quarter point. But we'll see. Like you guys have probably heard many times from us now, is it really depends on what's currently happening, and that can change pretty dramatically. There's obviously still a trade war going on. There's data that comes out all the time when it comes to unemployment, when it comes to inflation, and that will really pave the way for whether or not we're going to see more rate cuts. Austin has said in the past, and he's right, that typically you tend to see more than one rate cut at a time. So we saw 2 in a row. I'm saying that we're probably not going to see another one, and then we might see some rate cuts in the new year. So stay tuned for that.
So you think we're done for the year, hey?
I think we're done right now. I think it's going to take something fairly significant to happen between now and December. I forget the date, Austin, maybe December 10th-ish is when the next announcement is. Austin's going to look that up on the fly here. And as it stands, I don't see that happening. But you know what? I wish it would. So let's just wait and see.
Nailed it. December 10th.
Sweet. Okay. On the interest rate front, I like to give an update on this. Now is probably one of the best times it's ever been to have a variable rate. And I say that because variable rates are in most cases outperforming fixed rates in terms of, if you were to take an interest rate today, you're probably going to get a better interest rate on variable than you are on fixed. As always, risk is the biggest thing here. If you're comfortable with the fact that rates can change, you can always go variable. If you're not comfortable with that, maybe it makes more sense to go fixed. But on another note, you can always lock into a fixed rate later if you have a variable rate. So keep that in mind, guys. And then there's one more thing I want to touch on here. And I don't think we've talked about this before, Austin. It's kind of an interesting way to set up your mortgage. And it's called a hybrid mortgage. And it's actually where you take parts of your mortgage and you have different interest rates tied to them. So you could do like a partial fixed and a partial variable. That way you can kind of dabble in both, but not have all your eggs in one basket. It's kind of a unique thing. Not every mortgage lender will allow you to do this, but again, that's why you talk to us, and that's why we're here. That's our job, is to share those different opportunities with you. If you're kind of on the fence and you're like, yeah, I don't know if I want fixed, I don't know if I want variable, maybe we look at a hybrid option. Maybe that's something that you could take advantage of. That's all I got for today. So stay tuned. Like I said, I don't think we're going to see another rate cut before the end of the year, but I would be happy to be wrong about that.
Very well put. This is not in the notes, but maybe we can just ask you this. What is the spread right now between variable and fixed of what you're seeing? And then also too, what are some general rule of thumb rates? Like I think I saw something on social saying a lot of stuff you're getting in the 3s now. So yeah, just talk briefly about what you're seeing rates wise.
Yeah, so it's always going to depend on a few factors, but in a general sense, if you have an insured mortgage, it's very likely you can get an interest rate under 3% right now, and that's simply because a lot of the risk for the lender is being taken away by having that mortgage insurance. You're probably looking at around 3.8 to 4% on the fixed side, and then on the variable side, you're actually probably closer to like 3.5 to 3.8. So you're a bit better on the variable side, which means they're just giving better discounts on the variable side. And then when we're talking about uninsured mortgages, which means you're putting more than 20% down, the spread is pretty minimal. Like you're pretty much sitting right around the 4% mark on either. There's going to be lenders that are going to be a little bit more advantageous than others, but it is definitely possible to get a rate under 4% these days on fixed interest rates. And for variable, you're going to probably be right around 4% or under, depending on the type of mortgage you have. So yeah, it's good. It's a good thing. I mean, we've seen rates go quite high in the past year or so. So it's nice to see things kind of stabilize. And I think most people are predicting that this is probably where things will kind of stay, like between the 3.5 to 4.5 range. Getting down below 3% is unlikely, to be honest with you. Like it's not something that we're accustomed to seeing, other than obviously, as Austin can attest to, in the last, I guess, what is it, 4 years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, that we saw interest rates go below 2% and even 1% in some rare cases. That's not the norm. Like we're expecting rates to sit around the 3 to 4% mark, and that's just something that people have to get used to. And yeah.
Yeah, very very well put. We've talked a lot about this, that those pandemic rates are probably not coming back. You're not going to probably see a 1.65 5-year fixed or things like that. We just obviously saw the effects of that and what happened with the with the market. So yeah, no, very well put. Let's transition, segue into the stats package. October brings a welcome boost to the Fraser Valley, but sales still lag seasonal averages. So let's I'll let you break down some of these individual numbers and we can talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, and I'll speak to what you just said, the headline, because we've added that kind of into our repertoire now. It kind of speaks for itself. Like sales did increase in October, but seasonally we're still seeing sales lower than average. And that's not necessarily a surprise. It's good news. Don't get me wrong. It's good that sales are increasing, but we're not selling at a rate that's level with what we're used to seeing. So anyways, let's jump into it. So as always, guys, we like to talk about listings. We like to talk about how many sales are actually happening, and then we'll touch on pricing, and then a little bit on, okay, how long is it actually going to take me to sell my place? Now that's obviously a major variable, but we'll touch on that a little bit. So new listings actually decreased, Austin, in October. So down 14% and down about 7% year over year, which I would argue is a good thing. I would argue that means that we're not seeing as much stuff put onto the market, which means maybe we can start eating away some of that inventory that's already been sitting on the market. Would you agree, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's good. It's funny when we're going through some of the listings when I'm working with buyers, and I've definitely seen an uptick. I've helped a handful of people now, even in the last couple of months, that are first time home buyers. They're saying, okay, I'm getting off the snide. I'm gonna go buy a place, get into my first place, or upsize, like buy basically. It's interesting. We're seeing some stuff that is still priced crazily. That stuff is not going to sell. And I think a lot of that stuff, because it's been sitting on market for so long, maybe it's starting to come off the market. Maybe they are starting to do those price adjustments to real numbers. Yeah. And I think we also have had such an influx of inventory this year that a lot of those new listings, so to speak, have already been on the market. So, if you weren't able to sell successfully in, spring of last year, you could try again in the fall, but I wonder if maybe we'll just see more of this inventory in the spring of next year. People trying again to make their move next year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so some people being patient with, hey, you know what? Because as Austin said, the market does tend to kind of take a bit of a vacation around Christmas time. It's just the natural kind of course of things. So there might be some people prepping to, hey, let's get our place listed first couple weeks of January, and then at that time we can see how the market goes, and hopefully we have a strong spring market. So
That'd be
um,
nice.
that would be nice, of course. Active listings were at about 10,000 in October, which is slightly less than September. We were at about 10 and a half or 10,500 in September, which works out to be about a 4% decrease month over month. But we're still 15% higher year over year. So just because we didn't have as many new listings, active listings are still holding pretty strong. And they're still significantly higher than we were seeing last year. Austin, anything to add there? I think that one's pretty self-explanatory.
No, again, you're just seeing listings kind of pile up. People have got lots of options. I feel like showings have picked up a little bit on a lot of those listings. Like there's definitely people out looking, but even with this too, and we'll talk about prices next, but you can have a brand new listing that hits the market. You do your homework, you see what's and we'll talk about prices being down kind of month over month and year over year next. But you'll have listings that are like brand new that hit the market that you believe are priced really well, or maybe within a couple percent of what you think the place is actually worth. Like we call it like aspirational pricing, and what I mean by that is like you start a little bit high, hoping that somebody kind of comes in underneath and negotiate that way. You can also obviously price it like, hey, this is what we want, this is what we're willing to take, like this is our number, and that can work out, that can not work out. Or you see people that purposely list low, trying to get people bidding against each other to basically try and up the price of the property, right? You can have a brand new listing that you're seeing a couple percentage points below the last sale. And I'm still getting calls being like, oh, well, what are your sellers' expectations? What are you basing this price off of? Do you guys have any flexibility on price? And it just kind of feels like the sentiment right now is that buyers want a deal. You can be the best priced property. I remember I had one of the listings that I fortunately just sold was a townhouse, and we were the best priced 2-bedroom, 3-bathroom townhouse in Willoughby, basically. And one of the feedback, because with our system, typically it'll send out automated feedback requests for anybody that does show our listings. And the feedback I got was overpriced for a 2-bed, 3-bath in this market. And I said, we are the best priced 2-bed to 3-bath in this market. We are below the last couple sales in our complex within a month or two. So I was like, okay, that's really interesting. That is the feedback that I get when we looked at what has moved, where we thought we needed to be, and that was still the feedback we got. Yeah, crazy. It's just we obviously had markets a couple of years back where people would buy anything no matter what. Oh, it needs $100,000 worth of work. Cool, whatever. We'll still take it. When can we move in? And now it just feels like buyers are back with a vengeance, and like minuscule things you're seeing come up in addendums for inspections, things like that. So it's just really interesting to see the contrast of those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest takeaway I took from what you just said is people want a deal. That's really what it comes down to, because they hear that everybody else is getting a deal, or they're saving 1 or 2% off list price. And even if you're the best listed price, they're like, well, I still want a deal ultimately, because they feel like they've overpaid almost if they don't get something below list price. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I think also what is happening too is I'm sure, like, one thing that we've kind of noticed, and this was a topic at our last sales meeting, is that it's been long enough that we've seen, I don't want to say a flat market, but it's kind of ebbed and flowed within a couple percentage price wise for the last couple of years. And I think I think realtors are now adapting better, and there's enough of a data point where, you sit down with the seller and they say, oh, well, I want what my neighbor sold for in 2021. They probably feel a lot more confident. And this is super sarcastic, guys. Bear with me for a joke, but they're sitting down and saying, hey, you don't need a realtor. You need a time machine, right? You're not going to get that price. So I'm sure some of the language when, people are saying, hey, I want to list here, and their realtor is saying, hey, you need to list here. Hey, look, you need to feel like you're giving a bit of a deal here and being the best product. But what I also know is that if you need to take a little bit of a deal on your sale, I think I can also get you a bit of a deal on your purchase. So the sellers feel like they've been beat up when they finally sold, and then they go and buy something, and they kind of feel like, they've got to do that as well, in some capacity. But it's just interesting. Let's talk about some of those prices and the benchmark.
Yeah, for sure. I'll jump to prices. Let's just talk about actual like transactions quickly, and then we'll jump to prices for Austin.
Yeah.
So transactions were just over 1,100 in October. Sorry, I'm reading my notes and I made a typo there, which was a 17% increase. That's pretty significant. Like 17% month over month is not something to kind of turn away from. So, but that is still 16% lower than October of last year. So yes, things are getting better month over month, but if we compare that to where things were last year, it's still a bit of a decrease. I think we have to look at that as a positive, because we're ultimately all we really care about is what's happening right now, what's in front of us. Do I expect us to see another increase in November? Hard to say, Austin. Maybe I'll get you to comment on that. And then when it comes to December, as Austin said, it's unlikely that you're going to see sales be at a high level. Now that depends on a few things. And again, I'll let Austin speak to this. It depends on when the actual sale transacts, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of like when it's actually registered as a sale. But ultimately, yeah, it's good news. And Austin, yeah, I'll leave it to you to kind of speak on that and where you kind of think things are going to go.
I mean, what's interesting is even when I heard another agent team talk about this, but typically December is really quiet. We joked about that off the top. The last couple Decembers, we've seen people around Christmas within the couple weeks being like, okay, maybe this is the time I'm going to do something. I want to pull the trigger on something before the end of the year. You see a lot of that inventory comes off the market, people that just don't want showings, as of December 15th, maybe they're canceling their listing and they're going to, basically relist in the fall, or in the spring, for second week of January, whatever. It's really tough to say. I feel, as much as historically, Decembers are quiet, end of Novembers tend to slow things down. The last couple of years, we've seen the opposite. So I don't want to go down the middle and not give an answer, but we'll see, is my response to that.
Remind us, Austin, when does a transaction actually be considered a sale? Like, so for example, the 1,100 transactions that happened in October, what is that? When did those transactions actually take place? Did they close in October? Like,
yeah, great question. So my understanding is typically that the transactions part is from basically when it goes from accepted offer to unconditional. So basically it's pending. So it's not based off of completions.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's different. It's funny because there's a couple different stats packages that people will use. Like the Fraser Valley is the one that we typically use that we're referencing. A lot of agents will use Snap Stats as well, which is an independent secondary one. And it'll also break down different areas and different sub areas into like, what are you seeing that's a buyer's market? What are you seeing that's a seller's market? It's a little bit more niched data. Which is super cool to look at, especially for us stats nerds like me and you out there. And then there's also some other resources that you can pull on as well. My understanding is that when it goes from like on the market to accepted offer with no conditions, so basically it's pending, they're waiting for money to exchange hands and people to move in. So yeah.
Okay, no, that's good to know. So last thing here on a transaction standpoint. So sales to active listings, we've talked about this quite a bit. It's actually up to about 11%. That's still considered a buyer's market. I would say we can safely and confidently say that it is a buyer's market still. Just because new listings came down a little bit, there's still lots of opportunity out there. There's still lots of choices, and it's a good time to buy. I think that's honestly the case. Anything you want to add there before we jump into prices, Austin?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, whether it's buyer's market, seller's market, something to think about is like, 11 of 100 homes are selling. So 100 listings, 11 of them are selling, or like basically 1 in 10 homes are selling, which doesn't feel like a lot. It's 10% or 11%. That's a small number. Even in a hot market, that would be considered like 20% or more. That's still not a ton. You know what I mean? But I mean, I also don't think there's anything wrong with a balanced market. I used to talk about this when I was in fitness. Like, maintenance is a great goal. Like, you running a certain, being able to perform something, or, do 10 reps of your bench press or whatever, at a certain age, and then being able to do that later is like a great goal. A balanced market would be great. Your stuff, if it's priced well, marketed well, doesn't have any issues, is going to sell. It's going to be very predictable. Yeah, you might have some people, if you've got a unique product, that try and sell and can't, and you might have some other product that won't sell no matter what because there's something going on with it. But balanced market is great. Balanced market is predictable, and I think even that would be even getting up into the 12 to 15% would be, I think, welcome news for a lot of people. All right, let's hop into benchmark prices now then. So detached month over month, we are down 0.6%. And then year over year, it's just over 5%. So 5.1% on detached properties. What's interesting, I think, with this, and we've talked about how rates have kind of shifted as well. I think affordability-wise, it makes a lot of sense. You're seeing prices farther down, lower rates. Can you compare those two rate environments on your end of what you were seeing at the beginning of the year or this time last year versus where we're at now?
Yeah, I would. I mean, without knowing for sure, you're probably at least a half percentage point higher at last year, approximately, which, I mean, half percentage point is quite a bit, right? Like when we're talking about $1 million, like that's thousands of dollars we're talking about, right? In terms of the difference in interest that you'd be paying for the year. So that's not insignificant. And I guess what Austin's trying to kind of allude to here is that prices are down, the cost to borrow is down. So you're not only saving on the price, you're also saving on the cost for that mortgage. So right now you're looking at about probably $500 for every $100,000 borrowed. So let's say you had $1 million detached home, which, to be fair, there isn't a lot of those.
I've got one listed if you're looking. Anyway.
Find Austin if you would like one. So yeah, I mean, and let's say you had an $800,000 mortgage, so you're probably paying about $4,000 for that mortgage. Last year, you'd be probably paying closer to like 42-ish. So let's say you save a couple $100.
A couple $100.
That helps, right? Like, don't get me wrong, that definitely helps. And not to mention that $1 million home that you bought, let's say now, actually cost just over $1 million last year with that 5% decrease. So
what is with this, and we're going so off track here, but anyway, that's fine. It's our podcast, we can do what we want. What is the average size mortgage payment, or like the average size mortgage that you kind of deal with, or numbers wise, what is the benchmark typically?
Yeah, the number I've always kind of been told, and it's more so been told because it's what we use to estimate, like, okay, how many transactions. We talked about this with Ryan Oakes, and I'm going to kind of plug our episode here with Ryan really quickly, because go listen to that episode if you haven't. But when we talk about calculating how much volume we're trying to do, we typically use a $400,000 mortgage as kind of a benchmark of like, okay, if I arrange this many mortgages at $400,000 approximately, then this is how much income I can expect to make. So on a $4,000 mortgage right now, you're going to pay about $2,000. For me, it just totally varies. That's why it's hard to say. Like, sometimes I get really small mortgages, sometimes they're bigger. And then that factor really depends on, is it a purchase? Like, is somebody buying? And if they are they a first time home buyer, or are they refinancing their mortgage? So it's hard to say, Austin, but I would say 400 is a good number to use. If we wanted to round up, we could, well, not round up, but if we wanted to go to a more even number, we could use $500,000. But
Well, yeah. And I think what's interesting with that too, I think, as we're talking through this is, at like, maybe you're getting a larger mortgage, but it depends on the product that you're buying. So like,
mhm,
if you felt comfortable with a $700,000 mortgage, but maybe if you go up to $850 for your mortgage, assuming you qualify for it, but you can get something with a suite and get, $1,500 or $2,000 a
100%.
month to help with that. Like that helps your math quite a bit. Cause now, going off the math that you're talking about, $400,000, $2,000 a month. So on an $800,000 mortgage, you're looking at about $4,000 a month for your mortgage payment. You
Mhm.
supplement $1,500 or $1,700 into that by going a little bit more.
Significant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you're basically paying, your mortgage is 150 grand more, but you're only paying $600 a month for that out of your pocket difference, right?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying is you're getting that extra income that offsets your extra costs. And that's a great way to look at it, actually. I think that's something that people should really consider. Like, you're like,
Mhm.
you know what? I want to get into a detached home, but I don't want to have to pay X amount. Am I okay with buying something that has a suite, somebody lives in it? And here's the thing, guys. You don't have to have somebody rent it forever. Like, you don't have to be a permanent landlord if you don't want to. Maybe that suite in the future becomes, let's say you have kids and your kids want to move down there. Like, that's something you could do. Or maybe you have a family member that's like your parent that's getting older and you want to have the ability for them to move in with you. Like, these are all good considerations. Obviously, you got to find the place, and that's Austin's job that actually has the suite and has the ability to do something like that. But they are out there. Like, don't get me wrong. So, anyways, pricing wise, let's jump to the next asset class. Austin broke down detached there. Townhomes saw the biggest decrease, about just over 1% month over month, and then about 5.5% year over year. So, I got to ask you, Austin, why do you think townhomes got hit the hardest here?
That's a great question.
And just, yeah, I mean, we obviously don't know for sure. So, let's just kind of throw some ideas out there.
The only thing I can kind of think of with this is maybe a lot of people were.
Think it's just inventory? Like, do you think it's maybe there's a lot more townhomes on the market,
Yeah.
and because of that, you had to be a little bit more flexible in pricing? You know what I mean? Like, you're like, hey, there's 3 townhomes that are the same. They're all 3 bed, 3 bath, but because we're all the same, somebody's got to take a haircut in order to actually get a sale.
Yeah, it's funny. I took a very awkward pause there, which is going to sound great as we're listening back to this. But the only thing I can think of is like, maybe, yeah, it could be a bunch of inventory, for sure. Like that comes to mind. I'd be curious to look up individually, like what the listing, like amount of listings are.
Mm,
One thing I maybe wonder though is how much of that is maybe people saying like, look, I just need a bite on my townhouse.
mm,
We've seen prices on detached come down. And, maybe if you're taking a little bit less, if you're getting into that deflated detached property, you have enough equity that you can purchase up to something where you get a suite. Like, I wonder if people are just kind of taking what they can get to make that jump. Because
Yeah,
now,
that's a really good point, Austin, actually. And sorry, I'm going to jump in here because what I wanted to say is taking a 1% haircut on your townhome and taking a 0.5%
on your
decrease on the detached, those could be almost a wash depending on what you're getting into, right? So,
Well, yeah, and the other thing that we were talking about too, with a moment ago with mortgage payment, and this is something that we talk about offline all the time, is you can down payment for a lot of people is going to be that limiting factor. So
mhm.
maybe if you want to get to 20% down and get a 30-year amortization, it might qualify you only to purchase up to a certain amount for your mortgage, but that might only get you into a townhouse. And then you're paying strata fees on top of that, right? So your monthly payments and monthly cost to you is going to be higher, as opposed to, if you had an extra 50 or 100 grand down, which is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. Just go with me for the point of the example here. All of a sudden, if that gets you up to the point where you can purchase at that higher price point so that you can get to 30% down, you're avoiding that strata fee, which a lot of people try to avoid as much as possible. So that's what I'm kind of thinking it is. Maybe people that have been in their townhouse for a while that have that equity that can jump to that other product. Maybe they're just being like, okay, let's just get a bite. Let's just, move on, because assuming you can make that jump, you're cash flow or your budget, assuming both products mortgage size would be comparable, you're getting more help if you have something with a rental income.
For sure. And last thing I'll say here is it could also be that the month previous, Townhomes did really well. Like more townhomes were maybe selling closer to list price, or there was a few that sold over list price. And because of that, we're seeing a bigger decrease month over month. You know what I mean? Like maybe townhomes were a little bit stronger in September in terms of holding close to their list price. And then because October, they weren't holding as close to list price, you're seeing more of that decrease. There's a lot of different factors at play here is what I'm trying to say. And we're not going to delve into the stats deeply in front of you guys and go through it and figure out exactly what the case is, but just kind of looking for some insight, and I think it opens some good conversation. So anyways, so let's talk about our next class. So condos or apartments, they were down just under 1% month over month and quite significantly year over year. So almost 7% decrease in apartments, Austin, across the board year over year. That's pretty big, to be honest. Obviously, that's not something we hope to continue to see. A 7% decrease year over year is going to scare a few homeowners for sure. But there's lots, again, that's another asset class where there's a lot of inventory. It's not surprising that we're seeing that decrease, but anything you want to add there before we kind of jump to the next part here?
No, I think you recapped it well.
All right, awesome. So days on market, keep in mind, guys, just as a reminder, this is an average. So this isn't necessarily the best metric, but it gives kind of a baseline of what you can expect. So both detached and condos or apartments are taking about 6 weeks to sell on average, and then townhouses are just a touch over 5 weeks right now. So your townhouses are still moving quicker, even if we're seeing a bigger decrease in price month over month. And I think that's something that we've spoke to many times, and I'll let Austin speak to this again. Austin, why do we tend to see townhomes move more than the other two classes?
Yeah, because you see upsizers and downsizers, right? You got people going from a condo to a townhouse. You got people going from a detached to a townhouse. So it's kind of like the middle ground.
Yeah, it's your crossover point, right? So, okay, well that's it today for stats, guys. Just to kind of recap, sales went up, active listings came down a little bit. Prices are steadily decreasing. And Austin didn't want to give a firm prediction on what's going to happen next month, so we'll have to come back and give him a hard time next month about that. So anyways, anything else you want to add, Austin, before we wrap it up?
Nope, I think that is perfect.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Awesome. Cheers. Bye.
Look like I stumped you there for a second.